Hi, everybody. This is Slava Kurilak, and I am super excited to introduce to you Mike Yap at Conscious OS. This is a guy who I truly respect. He blends different industries to bring his customers lots of value and help the world become more conscious, help the world reduce stress, and improve mental performance. I want to welcome Mike to this live stream. Please say hi to your audience.
Hey, Slava, thanks for having me today. It's been a pleasure. I've seen you in a while, so I'm excited to catch up.
It's truly an honor to have you with us. We live in a very uncertain world, right? A world where there are things that come that we don't expect. A great example of this was last year. COVID-19 took everyone by surprise. It was the black swan of 2020. And let's start with sort of the super high level of why does conscious exist? Why is it that you do what you do?
Got it. Yeah. So conscious exists basically to reduce world stress, chronic world stress. The reason for this is I wanted to be able to liberate people on all levels. And what I mean by that is, for me, there's the spiritual plane and there's the physical plane. And when I went around the world asking people two questions, one, what is your crystal clear vision for your life? And the second question being, what is preventing you from reaching that? The answers were pretty much the same across the board. It didn't matter which culture or country it was from. It was one, there's a lot of mental chatter in our minds. And that to me can be solved with meditation and breath work in the quote unquote spiritual plane. In the physical plane, what holds people back the most is let's be real, it's money. And so one of the goals for Conscious was to liberate people on all levels. And it was essentially, the vision came to me to pay people to meditate. That was one of the original goals of Conscious. So that's how we started originally with that vision. So,
yeah, it's very important that we touch on this bridge between technology and consciousness or mindfulness. We live in a very unpredictable world where things come to us and we need to adjust. So I'm curious how meditation is helping us as humanity respond to the challenges, and perhaps how technology can assist us in this process.
Yeah, I think what people are looking for now more than ever is a way to be happy, one, first of all. And the second one would be a way to connect with other people. So we're starting to see platforms come out where, especially now during COVID, where everyone's staying at home, that sense of like intimate connection that we're not really feeling anymore. We can do it through Zoom calls right now, but there's a platform called Clubhouse, for example. It's a great example. It's a very intimate new platform that's worth $1 billion already. And all it is just chat. It's like being in a room with everybody at the same time and just chatting. And it's a very raw, intimate experience when you're just hearing somebody's voice. So I think that's what people are looking for now. Along with the stress reduction, I think it's going to be very valuable for people. People are a lot of mental chatter in their heads with all the fake news, all the political views, polarizing views. Everyone has an opinion nowadays. So it's really good to be able to calm that mental chatter in your head.
Absolutely. And let's talk about what are some of the benefits of meditation, perhaps, for those who are not familiar. I know that sometimes it seems like a distant concept, especially for those who have not tried meditation. But let's discuss some of the benefits of meditation, then we can talk more about technology.
Yeah, so for everyone has their own reasons why they meditate. For me, it comes down to two things. One is the self-discipline it takes to sit down and not do anything for 1 to 5 minutes. If you're just starting off, I think the self-discipline alone is a huge benefit for your life, especially if you've never had self-discipline in your life. If you grew up doing sports and like martial arts, for example, was a huge impact in my life. I think self-discipline is one of the best things that you can train in your life. So the other thing being focus. I think focus, that one-pointed focusedness on something without distraction, I think is very valuable. So self-discipline and focus are the reasons that I meditate. And I have meditated using all different forms of meditation. Literally every meditation in the world I have meditated. And I wanted to create Conscious to basically quantify the different sorts of meditations and see which ones are actually working.
Yeah, I think that meditation is something that is accessible now more than ever, especially with internet and online education. And it's a great time for those who have not yet already tapped into this wonderful mindfulness technique to get started. At the same time, we now have new technology that is able to give us additional insight, right? Technology is able to show us something perhaps that we may not be aware of, or perhaps give us additional boost that we need to get to the next level. So let's talk about what type of data that we can collect as the result of perhaps becoming more mindful, or perhaps the result of gaining more consciousness.
Yeah, so this is a great question. So right now out there, what we see is there's a lot of opportunities to learn how to meditate. You have the two largest apps out there right now, which are Headspace and Calm, Calm being $1 billion company, and I only see them growing up from here. So the problem with those two apps right now is that they don't quantify your literally just playlists where you hit play and you assume that you are practicing meditation in a beneficial way. And I'm sure there's some benefits of that. However, with Conscious, we really wanted to quantify the meditation process. So the two key things that we're tracking, again, using computer vision and consumer grade smartphone cameras. So just on your laptop right here or on your smartphone camera, just by looking at your face, using computer vision, it's tracking two key biometrics, one being HRV, heart rate variability, a key indicator from stress all the way to flow states, and the other one being respiratory rate, so essentially the way that you're breathing. And those two are very correlated. The moment that you change your breathing pattern, seconds after, your heart rate variability will shift. So those are the two key biometrics. We think they're very important, and we're glad that we're tracking them.
Absolutely. Give me a second here. Yeah, it sounds like meditation is something that is able to help humanity get to a more conscious state, and technology is able to assist to help the individuals who are practicing meditation and people who are practicing mindfulness. So perhaps we again talk on a high level. For those who are not familiar, what would you describe to be the difference between meditation and mindfulness?
That's a great question. This is actually, so when I first started this project around 2 years ago, I onboarded like over 120 people into our Slack group. And one of the things that we had was really, if we're gonna lead the field of meditation, mindfulness, stress reduction, we really had to define the terms. And so your question was the difference between meditation and mindfulness, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so honestly, a lot of these words are just labels to me. And so we had one of our top Buddhist monks in the group of 120, his name was Sam, and we had Boris, my co-founder, and they went back and forth trying to define these terms and what the differences were. Honestly, I wasn't too partial to having a set fixed thing, although I had my opinions. But meditation and mindfulness, I think mindfulness is what is the outcome of a strong meditation practice. You become more mindful, you become more aware of how your actions affect the surroundings and how the surroundings apparently affect your internal field. So I think meditation is the gateway and mindfulness is the result.
Okay, what is the best way to think about technology in a world where we want to be more conscious, we want to be more present, we want to be more mindful? How can and should we look at technology to help us to achieve these goals?
Yeah, I would say first we have to become self-aware. This is the problem with most people in the world, is that they are not aware of self. So they have no idea. They like to blame the externals for things that affect them. So for one example, we have 4 different products that we're looking to put out on the market. One of them is the one that actually most people are excited about. And this is the plugin on your computer. So imagine you're viewing the internet for an hour and you're on Facebook and you're just scrolling through, reading news articles. Well, you're not really aware of how it's affecting you unless you turn that awareness in. And if you don't have a meditation practice, it's very hard for you to turn that awareness in. You check in with your heart. How is your heart feeling? How is your breath reacting to the information that you're consuming? So now with Conscious, it takes that off of your off of the need for you to turn your attention inwards, and it can now track it and show you quantifiably how what you're consuming is affecting you. So that is a very powerful form of technology. Another one would be like to put our technology into a car. We had a few car manufacturers reach out to us. Imagine you're driving your car, you're getting stressed. Well, if you don't know you're getting stressed, you're just going to start swearing and honking the horn, right? But if you do know you're getting stressed and your car, which is your ally, starts to tell you, hey, you're getting stressed, calm down, use these breathing techniques, maybe do a short meditation if you're at a red light, I think it's very powerful. There's so many different forms where we can make people more self-aware as they're moving through their day.
Absolutely. Let's talk, Mike, about the idea of being in flow and the idea of the flow state and how that correlates to becoming more conscious or more self-aware. Typically, when a person is in flow, they are feeling at their best, they're doing their best, whatever activity they're engaged in. And when you have some sort of a notification to them, when you push some notification to them, they're interrupted from that state, right? So perhaps they were at their best, now they see some notification, they're interrupted. So that becomes a challenge whenever you want to give information, offer insights to your customers when they are at their best. So is there perhaps signals that Conscious can look at that allows you as a platform to know if a person is or is not at their best? Perhaps when the person is not at their best, that could be a good time to notify the user of something. When they are at their best, perhaps that could be a moment to sort of collect that data.
Yeah, so first of all, Conscious would never interrupt you if you're in your flow state. So we have stress states and we have flow states. And I believe the popular term for this is coherence. So essentially when your breath and your heart are in the same sine wave, eventually you get into a state of flow. So we would never interrupt somebody in that state. It's only when their breath and their heart are not in a state of coherence. That's what would be when we interrupt them, and we would bring them back again to a state of coherence using breathing techniques. I believe the term in science is called, respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So that's essentially saying that when your breath and your heart are in coherence. And again, the popular term is just coherence in general, flow state.
Yeah, the idea of tracking your informatics biology is very important, especially if you want to give the user, in your case, your customers, the most insights. So if you're able to track biometric data, like you mentioned, heart rate, sweat rate, pupil, and everything else, including your body temperature, then you're able to give the user what they need. So when I think of bioinformatics, I'm also thinking about data that is not often obvious that you could be collecting. So for example, if you are collecting heart rate data, it may be obvious to somebody who has seen a heart rate monitor, but you could also potentially collect or infer heart rate variability, so HRV values. And that data is not necessarily intuitive, but it's very meaningful and it's very insightful for you as a platform, because you can then find the values that are perhaps they need attention, and then you can reach out to the customer with a specific recommendation. So what types of bioinformatics are not obvious, but they're very important for mindfulness or meditation?
Yeah, this is great. There's a lot of different metrics. Originally, when we wanted to quantify, let's go back. When I wanted to pay people to meditate, first we had to find out, one, are they meditating? So this is how we got into the quantified self movement. At first, I was like, okay, it's simple enough. If they've got their eyes closed and they're sitting up straight, then they are meditating. But that wasn't the case. Obviously, we needed greater, deeper metrics such as HRV, like you're talking about. So I think posture is a huge one. Pupil dilation, like you said, can be tracked with computer vision. I'm not too sure about sweat rate. I don't think that's trackable with computer vision. What else? Vocal is something that we haven't really implemented yet into Conscious, but the vagus nerve has a certain sound. So just by somebody speaking, you can tell if they're coherent or not. It's very fascinating. There's a few companies out there that are doing that. And in terms of like what we're doing with all this data, this is why we work with people like yourself in the AI fields to conglomerate all this data, make it meaningful, and then make it benevolent. So moving the user towards a benevolent state based on their current coherence.
It's fascinating that the human body can be operating in the peak state, the ultimate state, whatever state you call this, right? The flow state, the human optimal performance, and getting to that state is very often elusive. At least it seems that way by the daily consumer worker. And oftentimes athletes are living their life in this state more so than other types of individuals. They're often putting their life on the line. They often have very high risk and rewards associated with their performance. So I want to talk to you about this ultimate human state, right? The human consciousness at its best. So, what does that look like, right? So for the person who is not an athlete, can you talk and describe to our audience, what does that human ultimate state look like?
that is a grand question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've studied all world religions for the last 12 years. The one that I resonate with the most is called Tantra. It's this deep form of practice. And there's a term in there called Niralambaya. Niralambaya means there's a state within you. This we can call it spirit, we can call it whatever. This state that is not affected by any external situation. It is self-sustaining and self-supporting. It needs nothing else. It doesn't look for validation. It doesn't look for things external to please and satisfy itself. It is full in its own. I think that would be the optimal human state. Now, what does that look like from an external point of view? It could look like anything. It could look like a bum on the street. It could look like an athlete playing at the world-class level. I think the subjective view of somebody living in an optimal state varies, but internally it's a state of non-effectiveness, non-attachment.
Absolutely. I think that a big part of this state is how you respond to the world, right? So like you've said, it can be, it's hard perhaps on a very high level to judge somebody from the outside, whether they are in that state or not. You could potentially look at their response to a particular stimulus or event as one way to judge that. So, is there a way that technology can better track this state, right? So obvious examples that we talked about is using biology and using biological signals to track how a person feels or operates inside. But what other things that perhaps we can look at, something that allows you to know if a person is perhaps calm or less stressed? Is it just bioinformatics, biology we're looking at, or are there any other factors that we can sort of assume or infer?
Yeah, I'm going to point it all the way back to what we're talking about already, which is HRV, that being the key metric for somebody's state of calm. So with HRV, the reason we say we're dealing with chronic stress as opposed to just stress overall is because stress is actually good for you, yet chronic stress can throw you off kilter. So I'll give you one example. I just started running recently. I think most people as young children, as they turn into adults, they will either go on either side of the camp. I'm a runner, like I'm a long distance runner, or I suck at running. And so I always told myself I suck at running. And so I wanted to change that. So I started running long distances on the treadmill, for example. And I think one of the things that happens to us is at an early age, we're told to run around the school or the track or whatever it is. And we try too hard. We push ourselves. We put ourselves in the state of chronic stress. It becomes very hard to one, breathe normally, and also just like enjoy yourself. So what we're seeing with high performance athletes is that when they're running for like 20 kilometers or 30 kilometers or 50 miles, they're actually in a very calm state. And so I think that's key. The ability to stay calm amongst all the stressors in life. And that's why when you mentioned athletes having some of the most calm inflow states, that's the reason. They put themselves in very crazy scenarios and they're forced to find that internal calm within themselves. So I think HRV is that key metric. And again, HRV takes into account your ability to deal with super stressful states and super calm states. And it's that kind of average that you want to see at a high level, which is HRV.
Mike, let's talk about not just collecting data, but let's talk about how you and your team are managing that data, right? So, it's one thing to say, for example, that, hey, guys, we have heart rate data for the last 24 hours. Perhaps it's recorded every minute. But it's another thing to say, hey, guys, at this moment in time, the person was stressed, and it's now sort of is reflected in their heart rate or perhaps in their sweat rate. So managing data is very important. Labeling data is very important. So giving proper examples to a computer to give indication that it's either a stressful scenario or not, meditative state or not. So let's talk about how you and your team are managing data.
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, we don't have a huge data set. Again, we're about 80% done the application. It's not right now out in public. The data sets that we are working with are directly with the universities that we're working with. The universities are the ones building these computer vision algorithms. Now they're pulling in data sets from whatever that they have. In terms of what we're going to do with the future data, I'm not too sure. Again, we're setting the precedents. We need to be very careful with privacy versus health. I think that's a topic of the future, right? It's like, how much privacy are you giving up in order to benefit your health? And I think in the future, it's a no-brainer. People are going to give up all their privacy in order to have the best health in the world. So this is why we work with companies like yourself, people who are masters at data, labeling data, and moving it in a benevolent way. I'd love to hear your opinions on what you think you can do with HRV and respiratory rate at a massive scale. So assuming we had 1 billion users, 24 hours a day, we're monitoring them. What is it that we can do with that data? I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that being able to make accurate predictions or accurate classification of that data becomes more and more important the more data you collect, right? So perhaps at the beginning, companies who are starting with just a little bit of data, they can get away with using statistics. They can get away with using sort of very simple patterns to figure out what's happening, right? In your case, if you're collecting meditative data, you're using a specific statistic or statistics rather to calculate that perhaps majority of the time that there is a non-meditative state, and once in a while there's a meditative state based on a specific pattern of signal. However, as soon as companies like Conscious or others start to accumulate more data, one of the major requirements becomes, can we offer more accurate predictions? Can we offer more accurate insights to our customers? And that's when you typically start to see companies leverage, whether they're using machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, natural language processing. They're starting to use technologies that are able to adapt on data over time. So from the perspective of the data volume, at the beginning, companies can get away with basic classical programming. They can use traditional statistics. As soon as they accumulate more data, they start to use more advanced algorithms that are allowing them to more accurately make predictions or classifications on that data. But on another high level, I wanted to give sort of our audience an insight to not just the algorithms that companies can use to make sense of data, but also the methods that companies are using today and in the future. So let's talk super high level about artificial intelligence for a second here. AI as an industry has been accelerated by primarily the use of one algorithm, which is considered supervised learning. Supervised learning is the predominant algorithm that most companies are using today. So the big cats like Google, Amazon, Netflix, Baidu, they're all using supervised learning primarily, and that's how they're driving massive value into their organization and into their customers. And the way it works is simply that you need to have a data set that is labeled, right? So labeled data set becomes sort of the oil to a supervised learning algorithm. And the goal is to give examples, right? So you have some data input and you have some data output. That's ultimately what AI systems today are doing. They're learning from examples, and they're learning the association between input and output. This is where majority of companies today, at least traditionally, have been focusing on creating data sets that are labeled with good examples, right? So the better examples that companies create, the better the models and their algorithms are able to make predictions or classifications. However, what we saw in 2020 was that supervised learning algorithms, while they're very powerful, they do have one major drawback, and that drawback is unpredictable events, right? This is where we start to see things that are not expected, things like COVID that throws people's expectations sort of out the window. And now companies are asking themselves, well, if supervised learning techniques are not able to catch these black swans, then perhaps is there another set of algorithms that we can use? What else can we do? And we're now starting to see certain key players, cloud vendors, offering more and more solutions to another algorithm, which I think is highly underrated, but definitely will be a very powerful way for companies to move forward with unpredictable events, unpredictable data, and that is reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning, often labeled as RL for short, is one of the algorithms that is able to learn when you have very little data. So the idea of reinforcement learning, the technology has been traditionally applied to gaming industry, where you have some sort of a virtual agent, and the agent interacts with the world. And through the interaction, it's learning what is good and what is bad. So reinforcement learning algorithms are usually algorithms that learn from real world scenarios. They're not necessarily looking at historical data to figure things out. So in the context of a meditative data set, right, when you have a reinforcement learning model, imagine the model is it has a specific goal, which is to optimize the heart rate variability. Well, now it's looking at the very few data that it does have, and it's trying to optimize its parameters until it gets to the point where perhaps it's able to achieve a very low heart rate variability, and it's able to sort of reduce stress in the process. So reinforcement learning algorithms are now being sort of offered by more and more vendors. The other day, I saw Microsoft release a solution that offers reinforcement learning as a service, which makes it very convenient for companies to get started with the technology. And so I just want to emphasize that, while the industry has predominantly focused on supervised learning, and that's where you give it lots of examples, reinforcement learning now is sort of the new kid on the block, if you were, and it's able to help companies to deal with scenarios where you have unexpected events.
I like it. So would it be safe to say like reinforcement learning is like almost like real-time learning? Like, so for the user's individual session, it's learning about them without necessarily comparing it with a huge data set, and the supervised learning is more so using large amounts of data sets to predict stuff?
Absolutely. Both types of models can do real-time learning. However, reinforcement learning has proven, especially during COVID, that it's more resistant to change that happens that we don't expect, and it's able to adapt easier. So instead of looking at historical data to give a prediction or classification, it's now looking at perhaps most recent data, and it's using that as a leverage to give you the insight you need. And so from a perspective of application, the example that Microsoft has shared publicly with its consumers when it's offered the reinforcement learning as a service, it allowed website and business owners to envision a scenario where a user is visiting a website, and depending on what they look at, depending on what they click on the website is dynamically changing based on the user's behavior. So this is an example of a reinforcement learning model. The model has learned through simulation and observation how it should respond. And when you have a user dynamically changing the website becomes more personal, the website becomes more sort of live, and it adapts in real time. So it does feel like the algorithm is adjusting to you in real time, but it's only because the algorithms are running so fast that we're simply leveraging the computational speeds.
Nice, love it.
And supervised learning, reinforcement learning are just two of the most common algorithms. I want to emphasize that, the technologies that Mike has mentioned during this live stream is computer vision and deep learning. So I want to bring attention to everyone who is listening, sort of these particular domains, because they're today by far the most adopted AI technologies that we see in companies. So computer vision, for those who are not familiar, is a specific subset of computer science that deals with imagery and video. And this is an algorithm or a series of algorithms, especially when they're combined with deep learning, they're offering massive insights to companies who are using this data, right? So in the case of Conscious OS, team is using the person's imagery from their mobile device, or perhaps the person's imagery and video from their webcam, and it's capturing this data, and it's now able to analyze that data and offer insights. So the simplest example is, can we look at on a key-to-key or frame-to-frame basis what's happening with the individual? Can we perhaps extract some signal from that? Perhaps we can extract the temperature, perhaps we can extract how the person's body movements are, and heart rate, etc. And if we can extract that information, then we need algorithms like computer vision. We need algorithms like deep learning to make sense of that data.
I did want to talk about real quick the idea of entrainment. I think it's very valuable when we're collecting location data as well. So entrainment happens essentially, my yoga teacher used to say, you take a small room and you put a large grandfather clock inside, and you put a bunch of smaller clocks inside, and you mix up the times on all of them. Eventually, all of them will start swinging to the pendulum of the grandfather clock. That process is known as entrainment. It's essentially the thing with the largest coherence or resonance will eventually entrain everything else around it. So imagine you have Mike, and he's an amazing meditator here in Vancouver, BC. And you now have the multiplayer where everybody in Vancouver is now hearing Mike's heartbeat and hearing the way that he breathes on this app. Now, naturally, over time, with enough sessions, everyone will start naturally moving towards my resonance. I think we can use this in a very powerful way to let our users entrain other users and build stronger. You'll be able to see, oh, Vancouver, Canada has a higher coherence than, say, Alberta or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's super fascinating concept, Mike. I would love to explore it more. Can you explain to the audience, or at least from your perspective, what is the difference between entrainment and the idea of a group flow state?
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is. You can start to see entrainment happen in therapy sessions where they take one person who has like anxiety and they take a very calm person and they sit them back to back and they just breathe together. Good thing is you don't need to be physically in contact with the person. You can literally just hear their heartbeat for like half an hour, or you can hear the way that they're breathing, and that naturally starts to train people. It will entrain people into a state of flow naturally because it's the person with the higher resonance that is the one entraining the other person.
Yeah, this is very fascinating. So let's talk on a very high level. What type of impact does Conscious OS want to make on this world, right? We can do anything with technology. Technology allows us to scale and reach millions and billions of people. So what is that ultimate vision for Conscious OS?
I think it's back to the two things. So it's one, making people more self-aware, quantifiably, without them needing the practice of meditation if they don't have one, to turn inwards and say, how is my heart feeling? How is my breath breathing? To just give it to them straight up on the screen, 0 to 100, how are you doing? And then giving them not only self-awareness, but the ability to self-regulate. So people now, instead of needing to learn meditation or breathing themselves, they're now given a very visual, beautiful way to follow along and give them the practice, so that when they are out in the real world and they don't have this technology, something comes along and stresses them, they're now able to practice that self-regulation themselves. So self-awareness and self-regulation, and I think we would have made a big impact on humanity.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to hear the sort of the vision of that future state. Often as entrepreneurs, we work to bring that vision into reality, and we definitely face lots of hurdles, mental roadblocks, our own roadblocks, as well as external roadblocks. So let's talk about some of the roadblocks that you see externally, right? So whether you're talking to potential customers, potential investors, what are some of the hesitations you're noticing from what you describe about Conscious?
Got it. So one, I would say people get very shocked when I do my 30-second elevator pitch of, hey, the computer's going to look at you. It's going to tell you how stressed you are from 0 to 100. It's that fear of, I don't want a computer to know how intimate my internal states are. So there's that fear of like privacy versus health, like I'm talking about. And I think that when you talk to most people that are in this field that are collecting a lot of data, they're all very confident that people are going to be willing to give up their privacy in return for greater amounts of health. You can see this in a very basic example of just like something monitoring your fridge and seeing what's in your fridge, for example, so that it can order your next batch without you having to think about it. If you ask most people would say, yeah, probably. If I run out of eggs, I would want eggs to come to my house. Are you willing to give up all the information in your fridge? Most likely. Now, that's a very basic example, but other roadblocks we're seeing are more so to do with the technology itself. So we have issues since we're looking at changes in the skin at a very molecular level. Things like lighting, for example, if it's really dark, it becomes very hard to see, especially if the person's moving a lot. We are pretty confident that with dark lighting, even if the person has darker skin color, which is another thing to be concerned about, we're pretty confident we can hit a 94% accuracy level in terms of reading HRV. And that's compared to the gold standard of the chest strap. So those would be the two biggest concerns, again, privacy and the technical challenges with this technology.
It's always a challenge with technology to achieve a certain type of accuracy. But I do want to emphasize for those who are listening and talk more about the way that AI technology differs from other technologies, in that the premise is once a model is giving you what you're looking for, so perhaps you have some data around meditation, perhaps you have trained the model to predict when meditation occurs. Now what happens is, with the assumption that you accumulate more data over time, the model will improve its accuracy, right? So this is different than other types of technologies, because with more and more data, for example, if you're using blockchain technology, quantum technology, you may or may not necessarily improve the accuracy of your solution. You do accumulate more data, but the accuracy does not increase. With AI technology, on the other hand, whether you use machine learning, deep learning, or related technologies, you are creating a model. That model is giving you an output, and if you do nothing except for accumulate more data, you are now operating at a much higher performance point. And this is one of the reasons, and one of the competitive reasons, why companies who start to accumulate data early, they start to leapfrog their competition, because by the time that a company is able to apply AI technology on that data, it's now much further ahead. And one example, Mike, I wanted to emphasize to you and to our audience is a company like Tesla. Tesla has leapfrogged a lot of companies because it was collecting data from its car users as they were on the road, right? So the cars, the Tesla vehicles they were driving, they were gathering all of the different sensor data over time. And the more the cars were released into the public, the more that data sets grew. And Tesla always had a vision for using AI technology, but it was prepared in that it was collecting data early, right? So by the time that this ultimate vision was shared publicly, by the time that car manufacturers agreed that we should, as an industry, the car manufacturing industry should strive for something called full vehicle autonomy, then by that vision, that Tesla was ahead. It had the highest probability of success to achieve a fully autonomous vehicle because of its sort of early start in the technology, as a technology company, as a data company. And so for anyone who's listening, if you are accumulating data, if you have not accumulated data yet, this is the time to start, because you're preparing for the scenario when you do have the leverage of technologies like artificial intelligence, and it'll help you to get to that next level. Until then, creating that data set, curating that data set, labeling that data set is very important. So I'm glad to hear that, Mike, you and your team are already exploring all of this data availability, whether you're using mobile data, whether you're using webcam data. It's a great starting point, and then sort of from that, you're now able to extend to these technologies like artificial intelligence. And let's talk more about other technologies.
Thank you, actually, Slava, for that, because when we met like two and a half years ago or something like that, you really convinced me that it's never too early. Like, I think most companies are collecting data nowadays. And what I hear from most companies, I don't have money to hire the AI team, but I say it's imperative that you hire that AI team initially to help you label that data and help you show you what you can do with that data. So I just want to thank you again for shifting my mindset 2.5 years ago. So.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that as well. I think that a lot of companies are, especially those who have, just discovered a specific way to solve a problem. They're in that early stages and they need to think long term. They need to realize that that data becomes their competitive advantage. And it's great to hear you guys have gone down this path. I'm glad you have taken sort of our conversation in the past and ran with it. The way that I see companies now sort of moving forward is because the technology is being democratized. Artificial intelligence technologies are now readily available. They're available through open source. These technologies are available through different platforms and services. The technology is now a sort of blending into the use case of the business, right? So now more and more businesses are able to solve real domain problems because the technology is being democratized. Thanks to platforms by Amazon, Microsoft, and Baidu and others, companies are able to leverage these technologies at a scale that was not possible before. One particular trend that we notice for companies who are using AI technology is when a company is interested to leverage AI technologies, but they don't want to pay for the servers associated with the maintenance of these systems. What we're noticing, and this is what we're experiencing and offering to our clients as well at Produvia, is that we are offering a new type of deployments for artificial intelligence that are driven by serverless architectures. So this is a concept that is quite, I would say, trending now with more and more companies. So imagine deploying a machine learning model into the cloud, but instead of managing the machine learning model server, we are now deploying a serverless machine learning model. And that means that we're not managing the servers, we're simply executing the model, and the execution is run for when the user is asking for specific data. The execution stops when nobody is talking to the server. So this is a very promising, very powerful, I would say, a set of algorithms and architectures that when they're combined together, they're saving companies a lot of time, right? So I'll give you one example from what we've seen. We've seen clients spend upwards of $10,000 a month to have one server that is running AI systems in production. And when we implement, for example, serverless machine learning architectures, that's able to reduce down to hundreds or even tens of dollars per month, right? So we're talking about factors of 10, 100x on cost savings alone. So the technology is improving to the point where companies are leveraging these newer architectures. Companies are using services to get started faster. So I want to bring that attention to everyone who is interested in to use AI, is that you don't always need a custom solution for your data set. Sometimes the solution of the technology can be implemented if you use cloud vendors. Some services are readily available, very inexpensive, and they give you what you're looking for. But other times when you do need that customization, when you do need that perhaps a very unique data set and data labeling, then you do need a very specific solution. Perhaps you need to look at creating a custom machine learning model from scratch. Perhaps you need to look at training an end-to-end system in place. And that's where you can reach out to a company like Produvia. My team and I help companies around the world to implement models that are from this entire spectrum of where a company wants to be hands-off fully, or the company wants to be sort of in the day-to-day operations. So whether you're looking for a full serverless machine learning deployment, or you're looking to perhaps just explore what services are available for me to help me solve my problems, this is what we help companies achieve. So let's come back to the topic of consciousness. I really love this topic because, this is a topic that's also personal to me, Mike. I've been meditating for many years. I lost count, and in the last 2-3 years, I discovered Vipassana. Vipassana has truly opened my eyes to a deeper level of meditation, and I really love the benefits of mindfulness and meditation. And so, what is something that your customers need to know about conscious OS or about meditation? Like, is there something that you can share with your audience that allows them to dive into this world of meditation, dive into using conscious OS?
Yeah, I think for first-time meditators, one of the problems is you don't, just like we were talking about earlier, you don't know when you're in a state of meditation because your mind is busy. You might be focusing on your breath, right? And you might be like, okay, inhale, exhale, and you do it for like 30 seconds. And you're like, is this, and you have another voice that goes, is this meditating? And so I think when we're able to really define it through the use of technology, and like you said, when is that point when that person you can say is definitely meditating? I think that's going to be fascinating for people as they sit there in front of the camera. Now they're able to say, hey, is my meditation that I learned at Vipassana actually working? Well, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to focus on the Anapana breath, and maybe you hear ding, and then that means, well, we have to be very careful. That might take you out of your meditation. This is one of the concerns that we have to work around. But even just feeling like it may be a subtle vibration if you're wearing a wearable technology that says, hey, you're actually meditating. Now you're seeing progress, and with that progress, you can deepen in your meditation. I think that's going to be very valuable for people because most people give up. They might meditate for like half an hour. If they're not going to a 10-day Vipassana meditation, they don't have that time, right? So they do it for half an hour. They realize, the benefits are so subtle, and they are subtle. They accumulate over time, right? So I think with the progressive nature, with gamification, with technology, you will start to see meditation become like a habit, like brushing your teeth.
Mike, let's talk about Conscious as a platform. I know you guys are aiming to capture data from your users' devices, primarily mobile and desktop laptops. Have you guys considered capturing data from wearables? So things that a person puts on their body that is perhaps something that either they already own or something you can suggest they buy?
Yeah, for sure. I think you see a lot of technologies like with Conscious, you're only able to do it in front of a camera, right? So most people are like, they're sleeping or they're out for a run, they're not in front of a camera. So definitely we are looking into implement APIs that integrate with all these other amazing technologies that are out there right now. The reason we didn't focus on wearable technologies, which is actually the first thing that we wanted to do, we're like, oh, it'd be just easy enough to create a band. And there's like a million bands out there already, right? But it's just a huge barrier to adoption. You're starting to see $100 devices that people just can't afford. And we want to get this out to the masses. So when we're talking about affecting 1 billion people, you have to go the contactless route, which is what people have already, which is these cameras. So eventually we will, in that we want that aggregate of data. And that's what you're starting to see. You start to see companies that are only tracking like emotions that are subjective, right? You do the app, you say, how are you feeling? You're like, good. Now they also want to integrate with these wearable technologies because not only are you feeling subjectively good, but now we have quantified data through these wearables. So I think everybody wants to plug into those just to gather more data. But we're happy that we're contactless and hardware, not reliant on hardware. Sorry.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to see the wearables as being a very close sort of source to the biology of the person, right? When you're looking at a camera or a laptop, there is a slight distance between the data gathering and sort of and yourself as a being. When you do wear something like a ring, when you do wear something like a watch, you're moving closer to the biology in a way physically. And what we've seen, especially in 2020, is that some hardware vendors have leveraged that distance to offer insight that would not be considered as sort of at least intuitive from first glance. So perhaps it's a watch or a ring company, and perhaps it's collecting sleep data, but in the process, it's actually able to collect data about the general health of the individual, and now it's able to offer insights. For example, if that person is experiencing COVID-like symptoms, or perhaps if there is an already COVID in the body, right? So those kinds of wearables, because of their proximity, are able to offer insights to their users for things that sometimes may not be intuitive, like, for example, COVID-related tracking. So it'd be great to see Conscious leverage sort of this sort of readily available diversity of vendors, right? You know, once you do have something that's more concrete, you know, enabling integrations like you've mentioned with third-party vendors would open up this potential landscape for a variety of different data that I can only see, you know, giving insights. The other company that I wanted to mention that I think is quite useful is a company like Muse. For those who are not familiar, Muse is a wearable headband that you wear, and the goal with Muse is to track your meditative state. And by wearing something on your head, you are collecting data, biology in this case, about your state. And in Muse's case, they're offering biofeedback for the meditators to guide them through a meditative experience. So it has biofeedback been something that you and your team have thought about at Conscious?
Yeah, I mean, biofeedback is built into Conscious. Biofeedback naturally just means taking your actual current state and giving you keys and recommendations in a real-time way to bring you to a better state. Again, shout out to companies like Oura Ring. Love what they're doing. They've really saturated across all different industries and athletes and stuff like that. So absolutely love Oura Ring. And back to the hardware concern, we're starting to see even like VR headsets start to pick up. So even though they are like a couple $100 devices, you're starting to see adoption rates increase a little bit now. It took a very long time, so it's going to be very interesting. And again, the goal of Conscious is not to be better than all of these technologies. It's really just to be one of the many silver keys in this vision, this grand vision for humanity that a lot of people are sharing. The state of everybody being happy, full in their being, and also without stress. And so Conscious is just one part of the mass amount of movements. And I think we all share a hive mind. So in the unique way that I'm building Conscious, the unique way that Oura Ring is being developed, you have these VR technologies such as Trip. Shout out to Trip. Trip is a cool company, TRIPP. They basically walk you through the psychedelic states, including like your own death. Through VR, so it's very fascinating. I'm fascinated with every single technology, not just Conscious.
Mike, let's talk about the next steps for Conscious. We are wrapping up this live stream. There's about 5 minutes left. Let's conclude with what are you guys working on next? Like, what's your next step or next goal?
Yeah, so we're still going to be working with the universities to polish off the technology. Right now, my main goal is connecting, putting more content out there, which is why I agreed to do this interview, which is thank you so much again, Slava. Just getting more content out there. We're going to be answering a bunch of Quora questions, putting out videos and stuff like that. We want to show investors that we're really serious about this. We have a lot of interested investors. Nobody's been like, "Oh, what a weird company." They've all been very interested. Unfortunately, we've been a little bit too early. A lot of them like to see some traction. And so we're starting to build the community right now. I have a very strong marketing background. I want to build a community of at least 10,000 just to start getting data, whether it's subjective at this point, and raise that $2 million that we're seeking. We think there's a lot of investment money out there. Unfortunately, a lot of it went to Calm, the billion-dollar company, but hey, they set the pathway. So if anybody's out there that's interested, that is a meditator, that sees the potential for this technology, do reach out. And yeah, that's what we're going to be doing, building the community, polishing off the software, and then doing a soft launch this year.
It's great to hear that. I really look forward to seeing a product that I can use with myself, with my partner, with my family. It's always fun to play around with the latest technologies. And if you are using the latest technologies to help people guide into a more meditative state, that to me, that's one of the best technologies you can do, because technologies often feel like they are something we go to, something that oftentimes seems distant from us. But technologies can guide humanity. Technologies can help humanity become more conscious, more coherent. And one of the ways that we can do that is we use companies like Conscious to help us to get there. But beyond that, I want to talk to you about the last few minutes about if you have any final messages for the rest of our audience. If you want to share something, perhaps if you want to say something to your younger self, perhaps it's something you want to share with your audience about either Conscious or about this interview.
Yeah, I mean, again, I started Conscious with the main goal of, after making a lot of money in my other businesses, the main goal right now is to help 1 billion people. I think that everybody has their own way of knowing how to do that. And for me, meditation has changed every aspect of my life. It's taught me how to become more peaceful no matter where I go, whether I'm playing sports or I'm in business. I think if you're going to take anything away from this interview, it's regardless if you're using technology or not, start a meditation practice. There's a lot of places that you can learn about this now. I don't know if Vipassana is still going on, but type in Vipassana meditation. They take care of you for 10 days. It'll be one of the hardest things that you've ever done in your life. It'll build self-discipline. It'll teach you how to meditate. And after you do that, you'll see the power of meditation, and then sign up for Conscious and we can help you along the way.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. For those who have not yet already seen Conscious OS, please do visit Conscious website. It's consciousos.com, consciousos.com, consciousos.com. And for those who are interested to learn more about myself and my team, Produvia, our website is produvia.com. And I want to thank Mike for his time. I want to thank Mike for his insights. It's been great chatting with you, Mike. And as always, a pleasure to learn more about the work that you guys are doing. And I will be keeping a very close eye on your platform. As soon as you guys launch, I will be one of the first to use it. And beyond that, I remind everyone who is joining this live stream that this is part of a series of live streams we do every single week. So if you are interested to keep up to date on our live streams, where myself and our team, we chat with world leaders, world experts on how you can leverage technology to take your business to a next level, and feel free to subscribe to this live stream on YouTube, Facebook, or other social media platforms, or visit our website, Produvia.com. And if you are interested to chat more about artificial intelligence, then I highly encourage you to schedule a brief discovery call with our team, and then you can learn more about how you can solve business problems, how you can crush revenue, how you can reduce costs or save your team time by using AI technologies. So again, I want to thank Mike for his time, and I am super excited for next week, where we interview Ilya from VanHack, and we talk about how you can leverage AI technologies to source and scale talent. Thanks very much, Mike, and thanks everyone for joining. I will see you next week.
God bless, guys. Take care. Thanks, Slava.
Thanks, Mike.